Have you ever wondered why the quiet after a breakup feels louder than the relationship itself? You sit in your apartment, phone dark, the echo of his last text still vibrating in your chest, and something strange happens. The silence starts to speak, not in words, but in the sudden clarity of your own thoughts. This is the moment Carl Jung called the nigredo, the blackening, the necessary rot before the gold. Abstinence is not punishment, it is the crucible. And today we begin there. You already know the pattern. You meet someone who feels like oxygen, finally, someone who sees you, and within weeks, you're rearranging your schedule, your boundaries, your self respect to keep the supply steady. Jung would call this the projection of your anima onto a man who hasn't earned the role. The anima is the inner feminine, the part of you that dreams, feels, creates. When she's unconscious, she latches onto the first man who mirrors her light back, even if the reflection is cracked. You think you're in love, you're in projection, and the crash when it comes leaves you hollowed out, convinced the hollowness was always yours. But here's what most women never notice. The hollowness was never yours to begin with. It was the space he occupied inside you. Abstinence is the deliberate act of refusing to rent that space again until you've renovated it yourself. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Every hour you spend chasing validation from someone who can't give it is an hour you're not spending reclaiming the territory of your own soul. Let's make this personal. Think of the last time you ignored a red flag because the chemistry felt like fate. Maybe he canceled plans last minute and you told yourself, he's just busy. Maybe he never asked about your day, but you kept filling the silence with your own stories. That wasn't love. That was the collective unconscious doing what it does best. Repeating the script your mother, your first heartbreak, and every rom-com ever made wrote for you. Jung called these scripts archetypes. They feel inevitable because they're older than you are. But archetypes are not destiny. They're invitations to consciousness. When you choose abstinence, you interrupt the script. You stop auditioning for roles in someone else's story and start writing your own. This is where the second-person voice matters because I need you to feel this in your body, not just your mind. Right now, close your eyes for 3 seconds. Notice the place in your chest where his name used to live. Is it tight, empty, numb? That sensation is data. It's the anima whispering, "I've been outsourced for too long." Jung believed that the path to individuation, becoming who you were meant to be, requires confronting the shadow. The shadow is everything you've disowned, your neediness, your rage, your desperation to be chosen. Most women try to outrun the shadow by attaching to a man who seems to have it together. He becomes the container for your chaos, but containers leak. And when they do, you're left holding the mess, convinced it's proof you're unlovable. Abstinence forces you to hold the mess yourself. Not forever, just long enough to see it's not a mess at all, it's raw material. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." The first act of mastery is refusing to let another person regulate your nervous system. You stop texting first. You stop checking if he viewed your story. You stop performing availability. And in the vacuum, something astonishing happens. Your nervous system begins to recalibrate to you. This is the alchemy. The nigredo isn't pretty. You'll cry in the shower. You'll draft texts you never send. You'll wake up at 3 a.m. convinced you'll die alone. But each wave of discomfort is a layer of someone else's fingerprints peeling off your psyche. And underneath? The gold. Not the fairy tale version, the real kind. The kind that doesn't need a man to validate its shine. Most women fearfully mistake intensity for intimacy. They think the rush of new love is proof they're alive. But intensity is just the shadow wearing cologne. True intimacy begins when you can sit with your own intensity without outsourcing it. Abstinence is the training ground. You learn to tolerate the full voltage of your emotions without short-circuiting into another person's arms. Let's be clear, this isn't about becoming a nun. It's about becoming a sovereign. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The outside event is the man who ghosts, the situationship that fizzles, the ex who resurfaces with a half-assed apology. Your power is in refusing to let those events define your worth. Abstinence is the daily practice of that refusal. You're not waiting for the right man. You're becoming the right woman. And the right woman doesn't negotiate her peace for the promise of company. She knows solitude is not the absence of love, it's the presence of self. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Abstinence is the toll booth on that road. You pay with loneliness, with boredom, with the terrifying freedom of an unscripted evening. And in return, you get the one thing no man can give you, the unshakable knowledge that you are enough. You wake up on a Saturday with no plans and no one to text. The old reflex kicks in. Open the dating app, scroll, match, distract. But this time you don't. You leave the phone face down and walk to the kitchen. The silence is thick, almost physical. Most women would call a friend, blast music, anything to drown it out. You don't. You let it sit. This is the moment the animus begins to stir. Jung described the animus as the inner masculine, logic, assertion, direction. In women who chase unavailable men, the animus is usually exiled. He's been told he's too much, too opinionated, too ambitious, too direct. So he goes underground, and you outsource him to the first guy who texts "good morning" with confidence. You mistake his certainty for your own, but certainty borrowed is certainty lost the minute he stops replying. Abstinence is the process of calling the animus home, not to become masculine, but to integrate him. You need his spine when you're tempted to apologize for having standards. You need his clarity when a situationship tries to blur the lines. You need his courage when the fear of being alone whispers that any connection is better than none. Think about the last time you muted your own voice to keep the peace. Maybe you wanted to talk about the future and he changed the subject, so you let it go. Maybe you knew he was seeing other people, but convinced yourself exclusivity would come when he's ready. That wasn't compromise, that was the animus in chains. Every time you silence him, you hand the keys to someone who doesn't deserve them. Now, in the quiet of abstinence, you start to hear him. He doesn't shout, he asks questions. Why are you explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening? Why are you shrinking to fit a role he never offered? These questions feel like judgment at first. They're not. They're orientation. The animus is your internal compass, and he's been spinning because you keep pointing him toward external North Stars. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The imagination part is where the animus gets hijacked. You imagine that if you just say the right thing, he'll finally commit. You imagine that if you're patient enough, he'll see your worth. You imagine that being chosen will quiet the ache. But the ache isn't about him. It's about the animus pacing in the basement, waiting for you to unlock the door. Unlocking looks like small, deliberate acts. You say no to the 11 p.m. You up? Text. You delete the app instead of refreshing it. You spend the money you'd use on a date on a course that sharpens your mind. Each act is a brick in the animus's new residence inside you. He stops being a ghost and starts being a guide. This integration isn't linear. Some days he's loud and you feel invincible. Other days he's quiet and you're back to wondering if you're too much. That's normal. The animus, like any exiled part, tests whether the welcome is real. He'll push you to set a boundary just to see if you'll fold. He'll urge you to speak up in a group just to see if you'll shrink. Pass the tests and he settles in. Fail them and he retreats, taking your confidence with him. Let's ground this in your body again. Place your hand on your stomach, just below the ribcage. That's where the animus often lives. Solar plexus, the seat of will. Breathe into it. Notice if it feels tight, like you're holding something back. That tension is the animus knocking. He's not asking for perfection. He's asking for permission. Permission to want more. Permission to walk away. Permission to take up space without apology. Most women fear that integrating the animus will make them cold. The opposite is true. When your inner masculine is conscious, you stop needing men to play savior, provider, or validator. You relate to them as equals, not as completion. This is where attraction dynamics shift. Men sense the difference immediately. A woman with an integrated animus doesn't chase. She invites. She doesn't perform. She selects. And selection, not desperation, is the foundation of mutual respect. Epictetus taught that we should distinguish between what is in our control and what is not. The animus helps you draw that line in real time. His feelings between is in your control. His feelings, his timeline, his commitment, none of it is. When the animus is unconscious, you waste energy trying to control the uncontrollable. When he's integrated, you focus on the only thing that matters, your response. This focus creates a kind of emotional sobriety. You stop getting drunk on potential. You stop confusing butterflies with compatibility. You start noticing how a man treats the waitress, how he speaks about his ex, how he handles your no. These are not details, they're diagnostics. The animus runs them like a background check while your heart is still catching up. Abstinence gives the animus time to run those checks without interference. You're not clouded by oxytocin or the dopamine hit of a new match. You see clearly. And clarity, not chemistry, is what protects you from repeating old patterns. The animus doesn't care about six-pack abs or poetic texts. He cares about alignment. He cares about whether this person expands your life or extracts from it. You'll know he's fully integrated when solitude stops feeling like punishment. When you can sit in a restaurant alone without instinctively reaching for your phone. When you can watch other couples without the stab of envy. When you can receive a compliment without deflecting it. These are not small victories. They're the animus shaking your hand, saying, "We did this together." You're 3 months in, maybe 6, and the nights are easier. You no longer flinch when your phone buzzes with a notification from someone else. But then it happens. An old wound opens. A memory surfaces uninvited. His hand on your back. The way he said your name like it mattered. Your body reacts before your mind can intervene. Heart racing, throat tight, the sudden conviction that you've made a terrible mistake. This is the trauma bond speaking, and it speaks in the language of physiology. Jung didn't use the term trauma bond, but he would recognize it as the shadow's most cunning trap. The shadow doesn't just hold your disowned flaws, it holds your unresolved pain. When a relationship ends in confusion, rejection, or intermittent reinforcement, hot one day, cold the next, the nervous system imprints the pattern. You don't just miss the person, you miss the dysregulation. The push-pull becomes a perverse homeostasis. Your body learns to associate chaos with connection. Abstinence is the only reliable way to break the imprint, not because time heals, but because abstinence removes the trigger. You can't rewire a circuit while the current is still running. Most women try to stay friends or keep it casual to soften the withdrawal. That's like quitting smoking by keeping a pack in your purse. The trauma bond thrives on proximity. Remove the drug, and the craving reveals its true face. Not love, but addiction. Feel this in your body right now. Recall the last time you reopened an old chat just to see if he'd respond. Notice where the tension lands, jaw, shoulders, gut. That's the bond flexing its muscle memory. Modern trauma psychology calls this the polyvagal response, your nervous system scanning for the familiar threat it mistook for safety. The good news is that the same system can learn a new baseline. The bad news is that it learns through repetition, not insight. This is where Stoicism becomes practical. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Reject your sense of injury and the injury itself disappears." The injury here isn't the breakup. It's the story that you're only valuable when desired. The trauma bond keeps that story alive by replaying the rejection loop. Every unanswered text, every canceled plan, every "I'm not ready" becomes evidence in the case against your worth. Abstinence is the daily practice of refusing to testify. You do this by noticing the urge without acting on it. The urge to check his socials, the urge to send a casual, "Hey," the urge to rewrite history so the ending feels less humiliating. Each time you observe the urge and let it pass, you're teaching your nervous system a new equation. Discomfort does not require rescue. This is shadow work in real time. You're not suppressing the pain, you're witnessing it. And witnessing, not reacting, is what starves the bond. Jung believed that the shadow integrates when it's met with consciousness. The trauma bond is shadow material wearing the mask of romance. It tells you, if you leave this dynamic, you'll never feel this alive again. That's a lie dressed as nostalgia. The aliveness you felt wasn't love, it was hypervigilance. Your body on high alert, scanning for crumbs, interpreting silence as punishment. That state is exhausting, not exhilarating. Let's track a single day in abstinence to see the rewiring in action. You wake up, the first thought is him. You notice it, label it memory, and get out of bed. You make coffee. The second thought is, what if I'd fought harder? You notice it, label its story, and sip the coffee. You go for a walk. The third thought is, I'm unlovable. You notice it, label it old wound, and keep walking. By noon, the thoughts are quieter. By evening, they're background noise. This is not suppression, this is regulation. The animus, now more present from the last phase, supports the process. He reminds you that the bond's power lies in your participation. Stop participating, and the power drains. He doesn't shame you for the craving. He simply asks, what are you actually hungry for? The answer is rarely the person. It's safety, significance, or the illusion of control. Abstinence gives you the space to source those needs internally. Modern self-worth psychology emphasizes co-regulation, the way a secure relationship calms the nervous system. But co-regulation with an unreliable partner creates intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive kind. Abstinence forces self-regulation. You become the secure attachment figure you've been seeking. This isn't theory, it's measurable. Heart rate variability improves, sleep deepens, decision-making sharpens. The body votes with physiology. You'll know the bond is loosening when the memories lose their charge. You can think of the good times without the stab. You can think of the bad times without the spiral. You can even wish him well without meaning it as a dig at yourself. This neutrality is not coldness, it's freedom. The trauma bond kept you tethered to a version of you that no longer exists. Abstinence cuts the rope. Epictetus said, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of things. The thing is the past relationship. The view is that it defines your lovability. Change the view and the disturbance fades. Abstinence is the laboratory where you test new views. You test them by living them, not debating them. You live the view that your worth is non-negotiable. You live the view that connection is a choice, not a survival need. This phase is subtle but profound. You stop romanticizing red flags. You stop auditioning for roles in dysfunctional dynamics. You stop confusing intensity with depth. The shadow, having been witnessed, begins to integrate. It no longer needs to hijack your relationships to be seen. It's seen by you daily in the quiet refusal to reopen the wound. You're walking through the city on a Tuesday afternoon, and for the first time in years, you're not scanning faces for someone familiar. The absence of that scan feels like missing a step on the stairs, disorienting, then oddly liberating. This is the threshold of solitude, the place most women sprint past with podcasts, group chats, or the next swipe. You don't sprint, you linger. And in the lingering, the collective unconscious starts to lose its grip. Jung described the collective unconscious as the shared reservoir of human experience, myths, instincts, expectations. For women, one of its loudest scripts is you are incomplete without a partner. It's encoded in fairy tales, reinforced by family gatherings, amplified by social media. The script says solitude is a waiting room, not a destination. Abstinence challenges the script by refusing to treat solitude as transitional. You live in it fully until it stops feeling like a deficit. This is where the fear shows up raw. Not the fear of being alone on a Saturday night, that's surface. The deeper fear is that without a man's gaze you might disappear, that your contours only exist when reflected in someone else's eyes. Modern attachment theory calls this an anxious, preoccupied style. The belief that your value is contingent on being needed. The collective unconscious doesn't care about your individual happiness. It cares about propagation, pairing, continuity. Abstinence is a quiet act of rebellion against that agenda. Feel the fear in your body. It often lands in the throat, tight, dry, like you're about to speak, and no sound will come. That's the voice of the collective trying to silence your divergence. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." The imagination here is the parade of worst-case scenarios. I'll regret this at 40. I'll become bitter. I'll miss my window. Notice the I in every sentence. That's the ego defending its attachment to the script. Abstinence asks you to sit with the fear until it reveals its mechanics. You do this by staying present. You eat dinner without the TV. You read a book without checking your phone. You take the longer route home just to feel the air on your face. Each act is a data point. I exist without witness. The collective unconscious hates data. It thrives on abstraction. When you ground solitude in the concrete, taste of food, sound of your footsteps, weight of your own body, the script starts to glitch. The animus, now a steady ally, helps you interrogate the fear. He asks, what evidence do you have that solitude equals failure? The evidence is always secondhand. Your cousin's engagement photos, your mother's worry, the influencer who manifested her soulmate. None of it is your life. The animus doesn't dismiss the fear, he contextualizes it. He reminds you that the collective script was written before women could own property, vote, or open a bank account without a man's signature. Its relevance is historical, not personal. This is where Stoicism sharpens the blade. Epictetus said, don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well. The thing here is your relationship status. You don't demand a partner to complete the picture. You wish to live fully in the picture as it is. Solitude becomes the canvas, not the frame. You'll notice the shift in small, undeniable ways. You stop apologizing for taking the armchair by the window at the cafe. You stop explaining why you're traveling alone. You stop prefacing your opinions with, I'm not sure, but the collective unconscious expects deference. You offer presence instead. This presence is magnetic, not because it performs confidence, but because it is confidence. Unborrowed, unvalidated, undeniable. Jung believed that individuation requires separating from the collective. Not to become antisocial, but to become authentic. Solitude is the separation chamber. You enter carrying the weight of inherited expectations. Be agreeable, be fertile, be paired. You exit carrying only what is yours. The process is uncomfortable because the collective doesn't let go easily. It sends emissaries, the friend who says, you're too picky. The ex who texts, I miss your energy. The algorithm that serves you couple goals. Each is a test. Pass by staying in your lane. Let's track a solitary evening to see the integration in motion. You come home. The apartment is quiet. You light a candle, not for ambiance, but because you want to. You cook something that takes time. You eat at the table, not the couch. You journal one sentence. Today I belong to myself. You go to bed without the phone on the nightstand. Sleep comes faster. Dreams are vivid but not anxious. This is not romance with solitude. It's citizenship. You're no longer a visitor in your own life. The shadow, having been met in prior phases, now reveals a subtler face, the fear of invisibility. You confront it by choosing visibility on your terms. You post the photo without fishing for compliments. You speak in the meeting without waiting for permission. You wear the bold color because it feels like you, not because it invites attention. Each choice is a vote for the self over the script. You'll know solitude is integrated when it stops being a phase and starts being a preference. When you choose the empty evening over the mediocre date. When you choose the solo trip over the coupled compromise. When you choose your own company not because no one else is available, but because it's the best offer on the table. This is not arrogance. It's alignment. The collective unconscious will keep whispering. Abstinence teaches you to hear it without obeying. You become the woman who can sit in a room full of couples and feel neither less nor more, simply present. That presence is the gold of individuation, a self so solid it needs no external scaffolding. You're standing in front of the mirror, brushing your teeth, and the thought arrives unannounced. I could reach out, just to see. The urge is soft, almost polite, dressed in curiosity rather than desperation. This is the final archetype knocking, the persona. Jung defined the persona as the social mask, the curated self you present to the world. In relationships, the persona is the good girlfriend, the cool girl, the one who doesn't need much. Abstinence has stripped the mask so thoroughly that it now tries to renegotiate its return. Not through drama, but through subtlety. One message won't hurt. You're stronger now. The persona is clever. It doesn't want to destroy your progress. It wants to manage it. It offers a compromise. You can stay abstinent in principle, but stay relevant in practice. It points to the group chat where everyone's partnered. It reminds you of the wedding invite sitting on the counter. It whispers that sovereignty is admirable, but connection is human. And connection, it insists, requires a performance. This is the moment most women falter. Not because they're weak, but because the persona is adaptive. It evolves with your growth. Early abstinence was about surviving withdrawal. Mid-phase was about integrating the animus and healing trauma bonds. Solitude was about defying the collective. Now the persona arrives polished, speaking the language of maturity. You've done the work. You can handle a little contact. Feel the seduction in your body. It often pulls in the shoulders, a subtle lift, like you're preparing to smile for an audience that isn't there. That lift is the persona adjusting the mask. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Translate that to woman. Waste no more time arguing about what a sovereign woman allows. Be one. The argument is internal. The persona presents evidence. He's changed. You're different. It's just coffee. Abstinence at this stage is no longer about endurance. It's about discernment. You've built the muscle, now you choose when to flex it. The persona wants you to believe that boundaries are rigid, that saying no forever is the goal. That's not sovereignty. Sovereignty is the ability to say yes or no from a place of clarity, not compensation. The persona hates clarity because clarity exposes the mask. Jung said the persona must be relativized, not eliminated. You don't kill the part of you that wants to be liked. You integrate it. You let it exist without letting it drive. This integration happens through deliberate exposure. You notice the urge to perform, perfect reply, witty comeback, strategic vulnerability, and you name it. Persona. Then you choose the response that serves the whole self, not the image. Let's walk through a real-time test. Your phone lights up. It's not him, but it's close. A new match, charming opener, immediate chemistry. The persona perks up. This is safe. This is practice. Your animus, now steady, runs the diagnostic. Does this expand or extract? The trauma bond, now quiet, doesn't stir. Solitude, now familiar, doesn't protest. The only voice left is the persona, curating the first text like a resume. You pause. You ask one question. What am I optimizing for? Connection or performance? If the honest answer is performance, wanting to be seen as clever, chill, desirable, you put the phone down. Not forever. Just long enough to feel the difference between relating and rehearsing. This pause is the integration. The persona learns it's welcome to participate, but not to pilot. Modern self-worth psychology talks about differentiation, the ability to stay connected without losing yourself. The persona undermines differentiation by prioritizing impression over expression. Abstinence has trained you to express first. You share the messy draft, not the edited highlight. You admit the bad day, not the curated lesson. You ask the direct question, not the strategic one. This is terrifying for the persona, which survives on plausible deniability. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." The persona recoils at foolish. The integrated self leans in. You send the text that risks rejection because it's true, not because it's polished. You show up to the dinner without the armor of anecdotes. You let silence sit in the conversation without rushing to fill it. Each act is a vote against the mask. You'll know the persona is relativized when feedback stops hijacking your mood. A lukewarm response doesn't trigger a spiral. A glowing compliment doesn't inflate you. You receive both as information, not identity. This neutrality is the hallmark of the final stage of abstinence, the shift from reaction to response. The persona still exists, it has to for social navigation, but it no longer mistakes itself for the self. The ultimate test comes when he returns. Not the fantasy version, but the real one, with the same patterns dressed in new words. The persona lights up. Redemption arc. Proof of growth. The animus scans. Same extraction, new packaging. The healed trauma bond stays dormant. Solitude feels like home. You don't need to prove you're over it. You simply are. You respond, if you respond, from the center, not the circumference. This center is the self, Jung's term for the unified psyche. It's not the absence of parts, but the presence of perspective. The anima dreams. The animus directs. The shadow reveals. The persona presents. The self holds court. Abstinence has been the throne room under construction. Every phase, projection, animus integration, trauma bonding, solitude, persona relativization, added a pillar. Now you sit in the chair that was always yours. You no longer abstain to prove a point. You abstain because the alternative no longer computes. You relate from overflow, not deficit. You connect from choice, not choreography. You love if you love from the self, not the script. And in that love, whenever it comes, there is no possession, no performance, no penance, only presence. Emotional freedom is not the absence of desire. It is the presence of sovereignty. You desire and you discern. You reach and you release. You open and you protect. This is the alchemy complete. The lead of attachment transmuted into the gold of autonomy. The silence no longer speaks. You do.